Rachel Mitchell stood at her kitchen window, watching the rain streak down the glass as she waited for her husband, David, to come home from another late night at the office. At 32 years old, she had everything that was supposed to make a woman happy, a beautiful house in the suburbs, expensive jewelry, designer clothes, and a successful husband who provided well for their family. Yet as she stood there in her perfectly decorated kitchen, Rachel felt emptier than she had ever felt in her life. The marriage had been failing for years, though neither she nor David seemed willing to admit it out loud. They had become strangers. Living in the same house, going through the motions of being a couple, while feeling more isolated and lonely than they had when they were actually single. David worked increasingly long hours at his law firm, using his career as an excuse to avoid coming home to the tension that filled their house like a thick fog. Rachel had tried everything she could think of to save their relationship. She had suggested marriage counseling, planned romantic dinners, attempted to rekindle the physical intimacy they had lost years ago. But David seemed completely uninterested in putting any effort into their marriage, treating her more like a housekeeper and social accessory than a wife he loved. The loneliness was crushing her spirit day by day. Rachel had given up her own career as a graphic designer when they got married 5 years ago, at David's insistence that his wife shouldn't need to work. Now she spent her days rattling around their big empty house, trying to fill the hours with volunteer work and lunch dates with other wealthy wives who seemed just as unhappy as she was. What made the situation even more painful was that Rachel knew exactly what real love felt like, because she had experienced it once before. Before David, before the marriage that had seemed like such a good idea at the time. There had been Michael Chen. Michael, who had been her best friend since college and the love of her life, until she made the biggest mistake she had ever made. Rachel closed her eyes and allowed herself to remember Michael's laugh. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the feeling of complete safety and happiness she had felt in his arms. They had been together for 3 years and had talked about marriage. But Michael was still in graduate school studying architecture and couldn't afford to support a wife yet. Rachel's parents had pressured her relentlessly about settling down with someone more suitable, meaning someone with money and social status. When David had come along with his law degree, his family connections, and his ability to provide the lifestyle Rachel's parents thought she deserved, the pressure to choose financial security over love had been overwhelming. Rachel had convinced herself that love wasn't enough, that practical considerations mattered more than romantic feelings. She had broken Michael's heart and her own when she ended their relationship to marry David. Now, 5 years later, Rachel realized that all the money and security in the world couldn't make up for the absence of genuine love and connection. David treated her like an employee rather than a partner, making all the decisions about their life without consulting her and showing no interest in her thoughts, feelings, or dreams. She felt invisible in her own marriage. The sound of David's car pulling into the driveway broke Rachel out of her painful memories. She quickly wiped away the tears she hadn't realized were falling and busied herself with preparing his dinner. Even though it was nearly 10 o'clock at night, David walked into the kitchen without greeting her, loosening his tie and scrolling through his phone. "Long day?" Rachel asked, trying to inject some warmth into her voice despite the cold reception she knew she would receive. "Very long," David replied without looking up from his phone. "The Hartman case is more complicated than we thought. I'll probably have to work through the weekend again." Rachel felt her heart sink. Another weekend alone in their beautiful, suffocating house. "Maybe we could do something together on Sunday," she suggested hopefully. "We haven't spent any real time together in weeks." David finally looked up, but his expression was one of irritation rather than affection. "Rachel, you know how important this case is for my career. I don't have time for social activities right now. Why don't you call one of your friends if you're bored?" The dismissive tone in his voice cut through Rachel like a knife. She wasn't asking for a social activity, she was asking for time with her husband. Something that should have been natural and desired in a healthy marriage. But David made it clear that his work would always be more important than their relationship. That night, as David fell asleep immediately after eating his dinner and checking his emails, Rachel lay awake staring at the ceiling. She found herself wondering what Michael was doing, whether he was happy, and whether he had found someone who appreciated the incredible man he was. She had heard through mutual friends that he had graduated and was working as an architect in the city. But she had been too afraid to reach out and too guilty about how she had hurt him. Rachel pulled out her phone and, before she could lose her courage, typed Michael's name into the search bar on social media. His profile picture showed him smiling at a construction site, wearing a hard hat and looking more handsome than ever. He appeared to be successful and happy, which made Rachel both glad for him and sad for herself. As she scrolled through his recent posts, Rachel saw pictures of beautiful buildings he had designed, weekend hiking trips with friends, and family gatherings with his parents, who had always treated her like a daughter. There were no pictures with a girlfriend or wife, which gave Rachel a tiny flicker of hope that she immediately tried to suppress. Looking at Michael's life through social media made Rachel acutely aware of how much she had changed since their breakup. The vibrant, creative woman who had fallen in love with an aspiring architect had somehow been replaced by this hollow, lonely person who spent her days trying to please a husband who barely acknowledged her existence. Rachel realized that she had lost herself somewhere along the way. In trying to become the perfect wife for David, she had given up all the things that made her who she was. She no longer painted or designed graphics for fun. She had stopped hiking and exploring new places. And she had lost touch with most of her old friends who didn't fit into David's social circle. The next morning, as David left for work without saying goodbye, Rachel made a decision that both terrified and exhilarated her. She was going to start reclaiming her life, beginning with the parts of herself she had sacrificed for a marriage that was making her miserable. She didn't know where this journey would lead, but she knew she couldn't continue living as a ghost in her own life. Rachel's journey back to herself began slowly and tentatively. The first step was setting up a small art studio in the spare bedroom that David never used anyway. She ordered art supplies online and had them delivered while he was at work, feeling like a teenager hiding something from her parents. When David noticed the packages, she simply told him she was taking up a hobby to fill her time. And he showed so little interest that he didn't even ask what kind of hobby it was. Painting again felt like coming home after a long, difficult journey. Rachel's hands remembered the feel of the brush. Her eyes rediscovered the joy of mixing colors and creating something beautiful from nothing. She spent hours in her makeshift studio, losing herself in the creative process and feeling more like her true self than she had in years. The second step was reaching out to her old friend Lisa, who had been her roommate in college and maid of honor at her wedding. Lisa had tried to maintain their friendship after Rachel married David, but the distance between their worlds had grown too wide. Rachel had become someone who attended charity galas and country club events, while Lisa remained the free-spirited photographer who traveled the world documenting different cultures. Rachel. Lisa's voice was filled with surprise when she answered the phone. "I can't believe you're calling. How are you? How's married life treating you?" The simple question brought tears to Rachel's eyes, and she found herself telling Lisa everything: the loneliness, the feeling of being trapped, the slow erosion of her identity over the past 5 years. Lisa listened without judgment, offering the kind of emotional support Rachel had been starving for. "Honey, you sound miserable," Lisa said gently. "What are you going to do about it?" "I don't know," Rachel admitted. "I feel like I've forgotten who I am. I need to figure that out before I can decide anything else." Lisa had an idea that would change everything. "I'm having a photography exhibition next month downtown at the Morrison Gallery. Why don't you come? It might be good for you to get back into the art world, even just as an observer." Rachel felt a flutter of excitement at the thought of attending an art exhibition, something she hadn't done since before her marriage. David would probably object, claiming he had work obligations or social events they needed to attend. But Rachel decided she was going with or without his approval. When she mentioned the exhibition to David over dinner, reaction was exactly what she had expected. "Next Friday? Rachel, you know that's the night of the firm's annual dinner. All the partners' wives are expected to attend." In the past, Rachel would have immediately apologized and canceled her plans to support David's career obligations. But this time, something had shifted inside her. "Then I guess you'll have to go without me," she said calmly. "This is important to me." David looked genuinely shocked by her refusal to accommodate his schedule. "Rachel, this dinner is crucial for my advancement at the firm. What am I supposed to tell people when they ask where my wife is? Tell them I had a prior commitment, Rachel replied, feeling stronger with each word. Love them I have a life outside of being your accessory. The argument that followed was the biggest fight they had had in years, mainly because Rachel had finally found her voice again. David accused her of being selfish and not understanding how hard he worked to provide for them. Rachel accused him of treating her like an employee rather than a partner and never considering her needs or desires. By the end of the argument, they were both sleeping in separate bedrooms, and Rachel felt a strange sense of relief. The pretense that they were a happy couple was finally cracking, and the truth about their loveless marriage was becoming impossible to ignore. The night of Lisa's exhibition, Rachel spent extra time getting ready, choosing a dress that made her feel confident and beautiful, rather than one that met David's conservative standards. As she drove downtown to the gallery, she felt nervous, but alive in a way she hadn't experienced in years. The Morrison Gallery was buzzing with creative energy when Rachel arrived. Artists, collectors, and art lovers mingled among Lisa's stunning black and white photographs, discussing technique and meaning over glasses of wine. Rachel felt like she was stepping back into a world she had almost forgotten existed, a world where people were passionate about beauty and expression rather than just money and status. Lisa spotted her immediately and rushed over with a huge smile. You came, and you look amazing. I was so worried you might change your mind at the last minute. I almost did, Rachel admitted. But I realized that if I didn't start doing things that mattered to me, I might disappear completely. As Lisa introduced her to other artists and gallery visitors, Rachel found herself in conversations about creativity, inspiration, and the role of art in society. These discussions energized her in a way that country club small talk never had. She felt her brain waking up from a long sleep, gauging with ideas and perspectives that challenged and excited her. About halfway through the evening, Rachel was studying one of Lisa's photographs when she heard a familiar voice behind her. That one's my favorite too. Lisa has this incredible ability to capture not just what people look like, but who they really are inside. Rachel turned around slowly, her heart pounding as she came face to face with Michael Chen for the first time in 5 years. He looked older, more confident, and even more handsome than she remembered. His dark hair was slightly longer than he used to wear it, and he had laugh lines around his eyes that spoke of happiness and success. Michael, Rachel breathed, feeling like all the air had been sucked out of her lungs. I didn't expect to see you here, Rachel. His voice was warm but cautious, and she could see him taking in her appearance, probably noting the expensive dress and jewelry that marked her as someone from a very different world than the college student he had known. You look beautiful. How have you been? The question was simple, but Rachel found herself struggling to answer it honestly. How could she explain that she had been living a life that looked perfect from the outside, but felt empty and meaningless on the inside? How could she tell him that she thought about him almost every day and regretted the choice she had made? Been complicated, Rachel said finally, offering a sad smile. What about you? Lisa mentioned you're an architect now. Michael's face lit up with genuine enthusiasm as he told her about his work, designing sustainable buildings and his recent promotion to partner at his firm. Rachel could see the passion in his eyes as he talked about creating spaces that brought people together and served their communities. This was the Michael she remembered, driven by purpose rather than just profit, excited about making the world a better place through his work. As they talked, Rachel felt the years melting away. The connection they had shared was still there, stronger than ever, despite the time and distance that had separated them. Michael made her laugh with stories about difficult clients and construction mishaps, and she found herself telling him about her return to painting and her struggle to rediscover who she was. I always knew you'd find your way back to art, Michael said softly. You were too talented and too passionate to stay away from it forever. The simple statement brought tears to Rachel's eyes because it reminded her that Michael had always seen her true self, even when she had lost sight of it herself. He had believed in her dreams when others had pushed her toward more practical choices. And he had loved her for who she was, rather than what she could become. When the evening ended, Michael walked Rachel to her car, and they stood there for A moment in awkward silence, both aware that they were at a crossroads. Rachel knew that seeing Michael again had changed something fundamental inside her, awakening feelings and possibilities she had tried to bury for 5 years. "Rachel," Michael said softly as they stood beside her car, "I want you to know that seeing you tonight has been incredible. You seem different somehow, more like the woman I fell in love with in college." Rachel felt her heart racing at his words. "Michael, I need to be honest with you. My marriage, it's not what I thought it would be. I've been so unhappy, and seeing you tonight has reminded me of what it feels like to be truly alive." Michael stepped closer, his eyes filled with compassion and something that looked like hope. "I've thought about you every day for 5 years, Rachel. I never stopped loving you, even when I tried to move on and date other people. No one ever came close to what we had." The confession hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility and danger. Rachel knew that this moment could change everything, and she was terrified of making another mistake that would hurt them both. She was even more terrified of walking away and spending the rest of her life wondering what might have been. "I need time to figure things out," Rachel said finally. "My life is so complicated right now, and I don't want to make decisions when everything is so confused." Michael nodded, understanding the difficult position she was in. "I don't want to pressure you or make your situation more difficult. But I want you to know that if you ever need a friend, someone to talk to, I'm here. Here's my number." He handed her a business card, and their fingers touched briefly as she took it. The simple contact sent electricity through Rachel's entire body, reminding her of the physical chemistry they had always shared alongside their emotional connection. The drive home gave Rachel time to think about what had just happened. Seeing Michael again had confirmed what she had been trying to deny for months. Her marriage to David was over in all but name. They were two people sharing a house, but living completely separate lives, with no love, intimacy, or even basic affection between them. When Rachel arrived home, she found David waiting in the living room with a glass of scotch, still wearing his tuxedo from the firm dinner. His expression was cold and angry, and she could tell that her absence had not gone unnoticed by his colleagues. "How was your little art show?" David asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "I hope it was worth embarrassing me in front of the entire firm." "It was wonderful," Rachel replied calmly, refusing to let him make her feel guilty for doing something that brought her joy. "Lisa's work was incredible, and I met some fascinating people." "Fascinating people," David repeated mockingly. "Mean unemployed artists and wannabe intellectuals who think the world owes them a living? Rachel, when are you going to grow up and realize that there are more important things than playing with paints?" His dismissive attitude toward her art and the creative community she loved struck Rachel like a slap in the face. This was exactly the kind of attitude that had driven her away from her true self in the first place. The belief that anything that didn't directly contribute to financial success was worthless. David, those unemployed artists are people who have chosen to dedicate their lives to beauty and meaning rather than just making money. There's value in that, even if you can't see it. Value. David laughed harshly. "Rachel, do you see this house? Do you see the car you drive, the clothes you wear, the jewelry on your wrist? That's value. That's what my hard work provides for you, and instead of being grateful, you're running around with a bunch of dreamers who will never amount to anything." The argument escalated quickly, with years of resentment and unspoken frustrations finally coming to the surface. David accused Rachel of being ungrateful and naive, while she accused him of being materialistic and controlling. By the end of the fight, they had said things to each other that could never be taken back. "Maybe we should consider counseling," Rachel suggested, making one last attempt to save their marriage, even though her heart was no longer in it. "Counseling is for people who have problems," David replied coldly. "I don't have problems, Rachel." "You do? You're the one who suddenly decided that the life we built together isn't good enough for you." That night, Rachel lay awake in the guest bedroom where she'd been sleeping for the past week, staring at Michael's business card in the moonlight. She knew that calling him would cross a line that she couldn't uncross. But she also knew that she couldn't continue living in a marriage that was slowly killing her spirit. The next morning, while David was at work, Rachel made a decision that both terrified and liberated her. She picked up her phone and called Michael's number, her hands shaking as she waited for him to answer. "Rachel?" Michael's voice was surprised but pleased. "I wasn't sure if I'd hear from you. Michael, I need to see you," Rachel said quickly before she could lose her courage. "I need to talk to someone who understands me, and right now, you're the only person in the world who fits that description." They agreed to meet for coffee at a small cafe downtown, far from the suburban neighborhood where Rachel lived and the business district where David worked. When Rachel arrived, she found Michael already there, looking nervous but hopeful. "Thank you for meeting me," Rachel said, as she sat down across from him. "I know this is complicated and probably unfair too." "You, Rachel. You could never be unfair to me," Michael replied gently. "Tell me what's going on. You sounded upset on the phone." For the next 2 hours, Rachel found herself telling Michael everything about her marriage, the loneliness, the lack of connection, David's dismissive attitude toward her interests and dreams, and the growing realization that she had made a terrible mistake 5 years ago. Michael listened without judgment, offering comfort and understanding in a way that David never had. He didn't try to tell her what to do or make decisions for her. Instead, he simply provided a safe space for her to express her feelings and figure out what she wanted. "I feel like I've been living someone else's life," Rachel confessed. "I became the person I thought I was supposed to be instead of the person I actually am. And now, I don't know how to get back to myself." "The Rachel I'm sitting with right now is exactly the person I fell in love with," Michael said softly. "You haven't lost yourself, Rachel. You just got buried under other people's expectations. But you're still in there, and you're stronger than you think." As they talked, Rachel felt herself falling in love with Michael all over again. Not just because of their shared history, but because of the man he had become. Successful, but not arrogant. Ambitious, but not ruthless. Passionate about his work, but still making time for the relationships that mattered to him. When it was time to leave, Michael walked Rachel to her car again, and this time the tension between them was undeniable. They stood close together, and Rachel could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "Rachel," Michael said quietly, "I need you to know that I want to be with you more than anything in the world. But not like this. Not while you're married to someone else. When you're ready to make a real choice about your life, I'll be here. But I won't be the other man in an affair." His integrity and respect for her situation made Rachel love him even more, but it also made her decision more difficult. She knew that Michael deserved better than stolen moments and secret meetings. If she wanted to be with him, she would have to find the courage to end her marriage and face the consequences of that choice. As Rachel drove home, she realized that seeing Michael again had shown her exactly what was missing from her life with David. It wasn't just love or passion, it was partnership. It's understanding, and the feeling of being truly known and accepted by another person. She had settled for financial security and social status, but she had given up the most important things: love, authenticity, and the chance to build a life with someone who truly valued who she was. The weeks following her coffee date with Michael were the most difficult of Rachel's life. She felt like she was living in two different worlds: her suffocating marriage with David during the day, her private thoughts about Michael and what could be if she had the courage to leave. David seemed oblivious to Rachel's internal struggle. Continuing his routine of long work days and minimal interaction with his wife, he had stopped asking about her activities or showing any interest in her emotional state, which made Rachel realize how far apart they had grown. They were like polite strangers sharing a house, going through the motions of being married without any of the substance. Rachel threw herself into her painting with renewed intensity, using art as an outlet for the emotions she couldn't express anywhere else. Her canvases became filled with bold colors and passionate brushstrokes that reflected the turmoil in her heart. She painted scenes of freedom, birds in flight, open roads, stormy seas, all metaphors for the life she wanted but was afraid to. Claimed out one afternoon, while working on a particularly emotional piece, Rachel received a text from Michael. "Thinking of you today. Hope you're finding your way to happiness." The simple message brought tears to her eyes because it reminded her that someone in the world cared about her well-being without expecting anything in return. Rachel found herself texting Michael back, and soon they were having regular conversations throughout the day. They talked about everything: his architectural projects, Her paintings, books they were reading, childhood memories, and their dreams for the future. The connection they had always shared grew stronger with each exchange, and Rachel felt herself coming alive in ways she hadn't experienced in years. Michael was careful never to pressure her about her marriage or push her to make decisions before she was ready. Instead, he simply reminded her daily that she deserved to be happy, and that life was too short to spend it pretending to be someone she'd tend. The turning point came when Rachel's mother called to invite her and David to a family gathering. During the conversation, her mother made casual comments about how lucky Rachel was to have such a successful husband and how proud the family was of the life she had built. "Mom," Rachel said carefully, "what if I told you that I wasn't actually happy? What if I told you that all this success and luxury doesn't mean anything if there's no love?" Her mother's response was exactly what Rachel had feared but expected. "Rachel, honey, marriage isn't about being happy all the time. It's about security and building a life together. You have everything any woman could want. Don't throw it away for some romantic fantasy." Conversation with her mother made Rachel realize that she had been living her entire adult life trying to meet other people's expectations rather than her own. Her parents had wanted her to marry someone stable and wealthy, so she had chosen David over Michael. Society had told her that a successful marriage was measured by material possessions and social status, so she had ignored the absence of love and connection. But listening to her mother dismiss her happiness as unimportant made Rachel understand that she was the only person who could change her situation. No one else was going to give her permission to choose love over security or authenticity over appearances. That evening, Arisha made a decision that would change everything. She called her college friend Lisa and asked if she could stay with her for a few days while she figured things out. Lisa immediately agreed, offering her spare bedroom and emotional support without asking too many questions. Rachel spent the next day packing a small suitcase while David was at work, taking only the things that truly mattered to her: her art, supplies, a few favorite books, and the clothes that made her feel like herself rather than David's wife. She left behind all the expensive jewelry and designer clothes that had never really felt like hers anyway. Writing the letter to David was one of the hardest things Rachel had ever done, but also one of the most honest. She explained that their marriage had become a prison for both of them, and that they deserved the chance to find happiness with people who could love them the way they needed to be loved. "David," she wrote, "I know this will come as a shock, but I need you to understand that this isn't about another man or a sudden decision. This is about the fact that we've been slowly drowning in a marriage that stopped working years ago. Is both been too afraid to admit that we want different things from life and love. I hope you can find someone who appreciates the man you are, because I'm not that person anymore." Rachel left the letter on David's pillow and walked out of the house. That had been her prison for 5 years, feeling terrified but also more alive than she had felt in years. She drove to Lisa's apartment with tears streaming down her face, but they were tears of relief as much as sadness. Lisa welcomed her with open arms and a bottle of wine, listening to the whole story without judgment. "I'm proud of you, Lisa," said when Rachel finished explaining everything. "It takes incredible courage to admit when you've made a mistake, and even more courage to fix it." "I'm scared," Rachel admitted. "I don't know what I'm going to do for money, where I'm going to live, or how I'm going to rebuild my life. All I know is that I couldn't spend another day pretending to be happy in a marriage that was killing my soul." "You'll figure it out," Lisa assured her. "You're stronger and more talented than you realize. You're not alone. You have people who love and support you." That night, lying in Lisa's spare bed, Rachel felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in years. For the first time in a long time, she was exactly where she chose to be, surrounded by people who accepted her for who she really was. The next morning, Rachel woke up to 17 missed calls and dozens of angry text messages from David. He was furious, confused, and demanding that she'd come home immediately to discuss things like rational adults. But Rachel could see through his anger to the relief underneath. David had been just as trapped in their loveless marriage as she had been, and part of him was probably grateful that she had found the courage to end it. Instead of responding to David's demands, Rachel sent a single text to Michael, I left David. I'm staying with Lisa for now. I know you said you'd wait for me to make a real choice about my life, and I have. If you're still interested in seeing where this could go, I'd love to have dinner with you tonight. Michael's response came within minutes. I've been waiting for you for 5 years, Rachel. I'm not going anywhere now. I'll pick you up at 7, and we can start figuring out our future together. As Rachel read his message, she felt hope blooming in her chest for the first time in years. She had finally found the courage to choose love over security, authenticity over appearances, and her own happiness over other people's expectations. The road ahead would be difficult, but she wouldn't be walking it alone. Rachel spent the day painting, not the careful, controlled pieces she had been creating in her marriage, but wild, joyful canvases full of color and movement and life. Each brushstroke felt like a declaration of freedom, and each color choice felt like a step toward the woman she had always been meant to be. When Michael arrived that evening, he found Rachel transformed. Gone was the perfectly polished wife, trying to meet impossible standards. In her place was the vibrant, creative woman he had fallen in love with years ago, finally free to be herself without apology or compromise. The dinner that night felt like a homecoming. Michael took Rachel to a small Italian restaurant downtown, the kind of intimate place where they could talk freely without worrying about running into anyone from her old life. From each other, Rachel felt the last 5 years melting away, replaced by the easy connection and deep understanding they had always shared. I can't believe you're really here, Michael said, reaching across the table to take her hand. I kept thinking I might be dreaming. I'm here, Rachel said softly, intertwining their fingers. I'm finally here, and I'm free to choose what I want instead of what other people think I should want. They talked for hours about everything that had happened since they last saw each other. Michael shared stories about his architectural projects, his travels, and the loneliness he had felt trying to build a life without the person he considered his soulmate. Rachel opened up about the slow deterioration of her marriage, her journey back to art, and the courage it had taken to walk away from security in favor of authenticity. I need you to know something, Rachel said, as they shared dessert. I left David. It wasn't just because I wanted to be with you. It was because I realized I had lost myself completely, and I needed to find my way back to who I really am. Being with you again has shown me what that looks like, but I would have left him anyway. Michael squeezed her hand gently. You did it for yourself first. That makes it real and lasting. Rachel, I want to rebuild what we had, but I want it to be even stronger this time. We're both different people now, older, more sure of what we want from life. The conversation turned to practical matters as they discussed what came next. Rachel needed to find a place to live and a way to support herself. She had some savings from before her marriage, but not enough to live on for very long. Michael immediately offered to help, but Rachel gently declined. I need to prove to myself that I can be independent, she explained. I went straight from my parents' house to living with David, and I've never actually taken care of myself financially. I need to know that I can do it before I can be a real partner to anyone. Michael's respect for her decision only made Rachel love him more. Instead of trying to rescue her or solve her problems, he supported her desire to stand on her own feet while offering emotional encouragement and practical advice. Over the following weeks, Rachel threw herself into rebuilding her life from the ground up. She found a small studio apartment in the arts district downtown, close to galleries and other creative people. The space was tiny compared to the house she had shared with David, but it felt like a palace because every inch of it reflected her own choices and personality. Rachel also began seriously pursuing her art career for the first time since college. She reached out to gallery owners, applied for local art shows, and started teaching private painting lessons to supplement her income. The work was challenging and sometimes discouraging, but it felt authentic in a way that her life with David never had. Lisa helped Rachel navigate the practical aspects of her new independence, from setting up utilities to managing a budget. I'm so proud of you, Lisa told her one evening as they painted together in Rachel's new studio. You're becoming the woman you were always meant to be. The divorce proceedings were more difficult than Rachel had anticipated. David was hurt and angry, and he made the process as complicated as possible, fighting over every asset and dragging out negotiations for months. His lawyer painted Rachel as an ungrateful wife who had abandoned her responsibilities, while Rachel's lawyer argued that she was entitled to half of the assets they had accumulated during their marriage. "He's trying to punish you for leaving," Rachel's lawyer explained during one particularly difficult session. "But the law is on your side. You were married for 5 years and you contributed to the household even if you weren't earning income." Legal battles were exhausting and emotionally draining. They also strengthened Rachel's resolve to build a life that was truly her own. Every court date and every negotiation session reminded her why she had left in the first place, and reinforced her determination never to compromise her authentic self again. Throughout this difficult period, Michael was a constant source of support and encouragement. He never pressured Rachel to spend more time with him than she was ready for, understanding that she needed space to discover who she was as an independent woman. Instead, he was patient and consistent, showing up for her in small but meaningful ways. When Rachel had a particularly difficult day dealing with lawyers or financial stress, Michael would appear with her favorite coffee and a listening ear. When she sold her first painting to a local collector, he was the first person she called to share the good news. When she felt overwhelmed by the challenges of starting over at 32, he reminded her of her strength and resilience. "Not going anywhere," Michael told her one evening when Rachel expressed worry that she was too much trouble. "I waited 5 years for a chance to love you the way you deserve to be loved. A few more months while you get settled isn't going to scare me away." Rachel's relationship with her family became strained during this period. Her parents were horrified by her decision to leave David, and they made no secret of their disapproval. Her mother called regularly to lecture her about throwing away a good marriage for selfish reasons, while her father threatened to cut off contact entirely if she didn't come to her senses and go back to her husband. "Rachel, you're making the biggest mistake of your life," her mother said during one particularly painful phone call. "David is a good provider, and he's willing to take you back if you apologize and promise to stop this nonsense about being an artist, Mom. I can't go back to being someone I'm not," Rachel replied, tears streaming down her face. "I'd rather struggle financially as myself than live comfortably as someone else's idea of who I should be," the conversation ended with her mother hanging up on her, and Rachel didn't hear from her parents for several weeks after that. The rejection from her family was heartbreaking, but it also freed Rachel from the last vestiges of living for other people's approval. 6 months after leaving David, Rachel received an unexpected call from a gallery owner who had seen her work. At a local art show, the woman was interested in featuring Rachel's paintings in a group exhibition of emerging artists. The possibility of a solo show if the work sold well. "Your paintings have such emotional depth," the gallery owner explained. "There's something raw and honest about them that really speaks to people. I think you have real commercial potential." The opportunity felt like validation of everything Rachel had sacrificed to pursue her authentic path. She called Michael immediately to share the news, and he insisted on taking her out to celebrate. "I knew this would happen," Michael said as they toasted her success over champagne. "You're incredibly talented, Rachel. You just needed the freedom to let that talent shine." As they sat together in the restaurant, Rachel looked at Michael and felt overwhelmed with gratitude and love. He had never doubted her abilities or tried to change her direction. Instead, he had supported her journey back to herself and celebrated every milestone along the way. "Michael," Rachel said softly, "I want you to know that I'm ready now. Ready to build something real with you. Ready to trust in what we have together. Ready to stop being afraid of making another mistake." Michael's eyes lit up with joy and relief. "Are you sure? I don't want you to feel pressured or rushed into anything." "I'm sure," Rachel replied firmly. "I know who I am now, and I know what I want. I want to create a life with you based on love, in partnership and mutual respect. I want to wake up every morning with someone who sees me and values me for exactly who I am." That night, as they walked hand in hand through the city streets, Rachel felt like she was finally living the life she was meant to have. The journey had been painful and scary. It had led her back to herself and back to the man who had always held her heart. The divorce was finalized the following month, with Rachel receiving a settlement that would allow her to support herself while she established her art career. David seemed relieved to finally close the chapter on their failed marriage, and their final interaction was civil, if not warm. "I hope you find what you're looking for," David said as they signed the last of the paperwork. "I already have," Rachel replied, thinking of Michael and her art and the authentic life she was building one day at a time. As Rachel walked out of the lawyer's office as a free woman, she felt lighter than she had in years. The future was uncertain in many ways, but it was her future to create, filled with love and authenticity and the endless possibility that came with finally being true to herself. 1 year after leaving David, Rachel stood in her own art studio, preparing for her first solo gallery exhibition. The space was filled with paintings that told the story of her journey from the dark, confined pieces she had created during her marriage to the vibrant, liberating works that emerged as she rediscovered herself. Each canvas represented a step in her transformation from a woman living someone else's life to an artist following her own path. Michael arrived early to help her hang the final pieces, and Rachel watched him carefully position her favorite painting, a swirling canvas of blues and golds that she had titled Coming Home. The painting captured the feeling of finding herself again, and seeing it displayed prominently in her exhibition felt like a celebration of everything she had overcome. "Are you nervous?" Michael asked as he stepped back to admire the arrangement. "Terrified?" Rachel admitted with a laugh, "But it's a good kind of terrified. The kind that means you're doing something that matters." The gallery opening that evening was everything Rachel had dreamed of, and more. Friends, collectors, and art lovers filled the space, discussing her work with genuine enthusiasm and appreciation.
Ow.
Lisa was there with her camera, documenting every moment of Rachel's triumph. Even some of Rachel's old college friends had driven in from other cities to support her. Most surprisingly, Rachel's sister Emma showed up halfway through the evening looking nervous but determined. They hadn't spoken since Rachel's divorce, and she wasn't sure what kind of reception to expect. "Rachel," Emma said quietly, pulling her aside from the crowd, "I owe you an apology. I supported Mom and Dad when they criticized your decision too. Leave David, but I was wrong. Looking at your art tonight, seeing how happy and alive you look, I realize you made the right choice." "Thank you for coming," Rachel said, hugging her sister tightly. "And thank you for saying that. I've missed having you in my life." "I've missed you too," Emma replied. "I was so caught up in what everyone else thought was right that I forgot to consider what was right for you. Can you forgive me for the reconciliation?" With her sister felt like another piece of Rachel's new life falling into place. She was learning that the people who truly loved her would eventually come around, while the ones who couldn't accept her authentic self were relationships she was better off without. By the end of the evening, Rachel had sold 6 paintings and received inquiries about commissioned work. More importantly, she had established herself as a serious artist in the local community and proven that her decision to pursue her passion had been the right one. As the gallery began to empty, Michael approached her with a champagne flute and a smile that made her heart skip a beat. "Congratulations, successful artist. How does it feel to be living your dream?" "It feels incredible," Rachel said, accepting the champagne and leaning into his embrace. "But you know what feels even better? Sharing it with someone who believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself." They stayed after the gallery closed, sitting among Rachel's paintings and talking about the future. Michael had been offered a partnership in a prestigious architectural firm, and Rachel's art career was gaining momentum every month. But more than their professional success, they were both amazed by how naturally they had fallen back into being partners in every sense of the word. "Rachel," Michael said, taking her hands in his, "I have something I want to ask you." Rachel's heart began to race as Michael reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I know we've been taking things slowly, and I know you needed time to figure out who you are on your own, but I've been carrying this ring around for 2 months, waiting for the right moment." He opened the box to reveal a beautiful, simple diamond ring, elegant but not ostentatious, classic but not traditional. It was perfect for the woman Rachel had become, someone who valued substance over flash and authenticity over appearances. "I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow," Michael continued, his voice shaking with emotion. "I'm asking you to marry me. Someday, when you're ready, when we've built something together that feels solid and real and lasting. Will you be my wife, Rachel?" Will you let me spend the rest of my life loving you the way you deserve to be loved? Rachel felt tears streaming down her face as she looked at the man who had waited for her, supported her transformation, and loved her through every stage of her journey back to herself. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, absolutely yes. I want to marry you, Michael. I want to build a life with you based on everything I've learned about what real love looks like. As Michael slipped the ring onto her finger, Rachel felt a sense of completeness she had never experienced before. This wasn't the desperate need for security that had driven her first marriage, or the fear of being alone that made so many people settle for less than they deserved. This was the deep certainty that came from knowing herself completely, choosing to share that authentic self with someone who valued and treasured it. The wedding took place 8 months later in a small ceremony at the Botanical Gardens, surrounded by their closest friends and family. Rachel wore a dress she had designed herself, simple and elegant. That made her feel beautiful and comfortable and completely herself. Michael's vows brought tears to everyone's eyes as he promised to support her dreams, celebrate her successes, and love her exactly as she was for the rest of their lives. Rachel's parents attended the wedding, having gradually come to accept their daughter's choices as they saw how happy and successful she had become. Her mother even admitted privately that she had never seen Rachel so radiant and confident, and that perhaps there was more to a good marriage than financial security. I still don't understand why you had to leave David to find yourself her, Mother said during the reception. But I can see that you're happy in a way you never were before. Michael clearly adores you. Sometimes we have to lose ourselves completely before we can find our way back to who we're supposed to be, Rachel replied. I had to make a mistake to learn what I really needed. As the evening wound down, Rachel and Michael sat together watching their friends and family celebrate their new beginning. Rachel thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment, the pain of her first marriage, the courage it had taken to leave, the hard work of rebuilding her life, and the patience Michael had shown while she found her way back to him. Do you ever regret the years we lost? Rachel asked, nestled against Michael's shoulder. Never, Michael replied firmly. Those years taught us both who we are and what we want from life. If we had gotten married straight out of college, we might have grown apart or taken each other for granted. Now we know exactly how precious this is. Rachel looked down at her wedding ring and out at the garden where they had just promised to love each other for the rest of their lives. She thought about the woman she had been when she had first married David Young, uncertain, desperate for approval and security. That woman had made choices based on fear and other people's expectations. The woman she was now had made different choices based on love, authenticity, and the hard-won knowledge that true happiness came from being brave enough to live as yourself, even when that path was more difficult. As they drove away from their wedding reception toward their new home together, Rachel felt grateful for every twist and turn that had brought her to this moment. She had been trapped in a loveless marriage, but she had found her way back to the one who held her heart. More importantly, she had found her way back to herself, and that made all the difference. The future stretched ahead of them, full of possibilities and dreams yet to be realized. Rachel would continue to grow as an artist, and Michael would continue to design buildings that brought communities together. But whatever challenges or opportunities lay ahead, they would face them as true partners. Two people who had chosen each other with their eyes wide open and their hearts fully committed to the journey they would take together.